The Los Angeles riots marked a dark time in our city's history, and we're centered right in the middle of it here in South Los Angeles.
25 years later, we'll take a look at how the city has changed and stayed the same. See It Live starts now.
Saturday marks the 25th anniversary of the Los Angeles riots. Good evening, I'm Kevin McAllister.
And I'm Mark Salinger. The riots happened after a jury found 4 white LAPD officers not guilty for the beating of Rodney King. In March of 1991, King was pulled over after a high-speed chase and beaten by police. Video taken by a nearby resident showed officers hitting King with batons more than 50 times. King suffered 11 broken bones and other injuries during the encounter. On April 29th of 1992, a year later, the 4 officers charged in the beating of Rodney King were acquitted after a trial. That night, riots began in Los Angeles at the intersection of Florence and Normandy. Rioters attacked and nearly killed Reginald Denny, a white truck driver who was pulled out of his cab as he was passing through the area. Mayor Tom Bradley declared a state of emergency, and Governor Pete Wilson called in the National Guard as violence and looting spread throughout the city. Almost 12,000 people were arrested as nearly 10,000 troops and officers tried to keep the peace. Dusk to dawn curfews were imposed in the city in an effort to keep people off the streets. Riots over the next 5 days left more than 50 people dead and more than 2,000 injured. You can see the blue dots here on the screen indicating deaths in South Los Angeles, where more than a dozen people died near the USC area. More than 1,000 buildings in the city were destroyed or damaged, costing over $1 billion. Rioters set fire to buildings and looted stores all throughout the county. Annenberg Media's Gabriela Vidal is live tonight at the intersection of Florence and Normandy, where it all began. Gabby, 25 years later, are there still signs of the riots nearby?
Yes, Mark, that's right. Although 25 years have passed since the 1992 riots, remnants of the structures that burned down during the riots remain here in South Los Angeles to this day. Corner of Florence and Normandy, where you can see one of the structures that actually remained from the riots, Tom's Liquor Store. Tom's Liquor Store was around during the Rodney King riots, which a lot of it took place right here on Florence and Normandy. Now, I actually went into Tom's Liquor Store to see if I can speak to anyone who was there during the riots, and unfortunately, none of the owners there were present during the riots, but they do say that there's this historical significance to this area, and just to the fact that so much violence occurred just here on this corner. One specific incident of violence actually occurred here on the corner of Florence and Normandy was when Reginald Denny, a white man, was passing by in his cab and was pulled out of his cab by rioters after the Rodney King verdict was held. Basically, they started beating at him, and it wasn't until people who were locals in this area who were watching his beating on TV were able to come and rescue him and take him to the hospital. And that's just one of the many incidents of violence, burning, rioting, and looting that took place along South Los Angeles. Now, of course, there are other buildings and structures in this area that suffered from the wake of the Rodney King riots. And right here, I will point to you an area where this took place. So as you can see, there's a T structure in that location past the Normandy sign, and there's a lot actually where a building once stood. Right now there's only rubble and dirt and basically nothing left to remember that building that was located there. Now, obviously, we don't have an indication of what that building was, but of course, it's significant because it basically shows that a lot of areas in South Los Angeles were really affected and were displaced. Businesses were displaced and people were taken out of business because of the riotings that occurred. Now, I tried seeing if I can find anyone in this area that was present during the riots. Unfortunately, I had no such luck, but many of the people do recall hearing about the riots and hearing about its historical tragedy to this area, making the violence only perpetuate in South Los Angeles. To this day, however, you can see that violence remains relatively unseen, and that's a pretty good thing, especially as we're approaching the celebration, the Remembrance Day, tomorrow. So I'm going to be around here a little bit more, and if anything occurs, then we might be able to see if we can speak to anyone later tonight. But for now, in Los Angeles, right here on the corner of Florence and Normandy, I'm Gabriela Vidal. Back to you.
Gabriela Vidal at the flashpoint of it all, 25 years later, showing us how the city is still affected. Thank you, Gabriela. Now, during the riots, one photographer captured the chaos from behind the lens. We talked to Ted Soki about how he saw the violence unfold.
I grew up in the same neighborhood as Rodney King. In fact, we went to the same high school at the same time. This is one that doesn't leave you because it's your home. It's things you grew up with, people you know. It was your neighbors. It was your friend's business. I'm still processing it. I really am. So I went to LAPD Parker Center, watched it evolve into a full-fledged riot, watch them overturn a kiosk, set it ablaze. I unfortunately parked next to a police car. The rioters soon turned over the police car, set that ablaze, and attempted to turn my car over. And the only thing that stopped them is that the police car was setting off bullets that were stored inside the trunk, and they started firing off with the fire. Nobody was really telling me where to be, so I followed the columns of smoke, and I figured the darker the column, probably the fresher the fire and activity that was happening there. The fires are burning straight up in straight black columns, and it was just sooty and toxic. If smoke could smell evil, that's what evil smoke would smell like. It was everything. It was a tragedy. It was a rebellion. It was the saddest day. It was like a ripple effect all over the nation. And I think that's why people are still, fascinated and interested in this, the story behind it.
USC's South Los Angeles location put the university in the center of the violence. DPS Chief John Thomas says public safety has evolved on campus since the riots.
The outreach programs that USC did back then helped, and I think even now what USC does is even more beneficial. USC is one of the more progressive universities when it comes to those kinds of things. USC, there's such a great affinity amongst the residents of South LA. Everybody kind of knew this is like the crown jewel. This is like the best thing we have going in South LA, so we're definitely not going to damage that.
Thomas worked for the LAPD during the riots before taking his post as the chief of DPS. Now let's send it over to Annenberg Media's Tommy Brooksbank with more on how the community is remembering the riots.
That's right, Kevin. The Community Coalition Center of South LA has a collection of art all commemorating the LA riots. The collection features artwork depicting tension between police and African Americans. Visitors also have the chance to add their names to the Reimagine Justice exhibit, pledging to invest in their community. I spoke with the museum's curator, who says remembering the violence helps prevent similar situations from happening in the future.
People leave with a responsibility. They see what really happened from the community's perspective, and what happened 25 years ago doesn't have to repeat itself. Because we're stakeholders in South LA.
We also spoke with several high school students from South LA who worked on some of the exhibits. They shared why they think projects like Reimagine Justice are so important.
South Central needs more art because I think it's a form of empowerment for the people here.
Doing this collection of T-shirts, it just grabs people's attention so they could see what South Central actually is, and it brings a lighter thing to it.
When you step outside, it makes you want to come back inside and be like, you know what can I do? What should I do next?
The Reimagine Justice exhibit will be open to the public through the end of the month. Mark, back to you.
USC is hosting panel discussions today and tomorrow, focusing on the riots. The first day examined how demographics and data shape Los Angeles community.
And the verdict came out and there was quiet, just quiet. But then outside, in the neighborhood and on the block, I just heard, and I won't use all the words here today, I just heard, not again, not again, not again. And you just felt the weight that was hanging in the air, right? And you just knew there was something that connected all of those voices, sort of connected all of that energy, that not this time.
Tomorrow, the focus will be on arts and culture of the area through food, media, artwork, and more. Now, some things have changed since 1992, but some have stayed the same. A new study by researchers at UCLA's Center for Neighborhood Knowledge revisited the areas most affected by the riots. According to the study, the demographics in areas affected by the riots have shifted. UCLA's researchers found the percentage of black residents decreased from 37% to 21%, while Hispanic populations have increased from 53% to 65%. The study also found that unemployment and poverty have actually gotten worse. Researchers say the lesson of the last quarter century is that much more work is still needed.
Some have pushed to erase a bit of history related to the riots. Former LAPD headquarters, known as Parker Center, is one step closer to being torn down. The LAPD moved to a new headquarters on 1st Street in 2009 after Parker Center was deemed unsafe in the event of an earthquake. Police employees pushed to have the building saved as a historic landmark, but the LA City Council vetoed those efforts. There are now proposals to build a skyscraper at the site. Ceremonies and tributes will continue to take place as the 25th anniversary approaches. On Saturday, there will be a rally and march at the intersection of Florence and Normandy. A Future Fest will also take place on the corner of 81st and Vermont, aimed to celebrate South LA's resilience and transformation.
Now, Kevin, today is our last show as we're graduating, but I want to take a quick second to say thank you to everybody that we've worked with over the past 4 years. A special thank you today to our executive producers throughout the semester, Abby, Sam, and John, and of course, a huge thank you to the faculty advisors, Stacy, Rebecca, Tom, and John. Over the past 4 years, we've learned, we've grown, and most of all, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we seriously couldn't have done anything without them, and we can't thank you enough. So thanks so much for watching See It Live this semester. From everyone at Annenberg Media, I'm Kevin McAllister.
And I'm Mark Salinger. You can watch us on the web at uscannenbergmedia.com.